This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of September 4th, 2022. What's on my mind this week? Understanding the implications of stable diffusion. This past week, you may have seen an explosion in the amount of AI-produced artwork. Why? And why is everyone talking about it all of a sudden? The oversimplified version is that stable diffusion is a new model for generating visual creative using artificial intelligence. What makes it different than other models is one simple fact. Its creators open-sourced it. To understand the implications of this, we have to understand the landscape a bit and clear up some definitions. When someone says the phrase AI model, what they're really saying is a piece of software written by AI, written by artificial intelligence. All machine learning and AI operates off models. Models are made by taking huge amounts of data and having machines recognize the patterns in that data and then be able to replicate those patterns. An AI model is a piece of software for AI to use in the same way that Microsoft Word is a piece of software that you and I use. Up until this point, the best models for AI image generation have been created by corporations who have a very strong vested interest in keeping those models behind closed doors. Google has some, almost certainly the big tech companies do. The models you've heard most about previously in the news and stuff include models like Midjourney or DALL-E 2 by OpenAI, which, despite the company's name, is not very open. What that has meant thus far, though, for professionals and amateurs who are interested in using these tools is that we've been able to dabble in the use of AI image generation, but we've not been able to fully leverage the technology because of the costs involved, right? When you use DALL-E 2, for example, it charges you per image. And so, you'll use it. It's fine, but to be really effective, like you might want to try a couple hundred experiments, and that gets really expensive really fast. This week, Hugging Face, which is a great name for a company, in partnership with Stability AI and Eleuthera AI, released Stable Diffusion. Unlike DALL-E 2 and Midjourney, Hugging Face not only released their state-of-the-art model, access to it, but the entire model itself. They basically said, here it is. Everyone can play with it. This is a huge step because it means that anyone can download their model. And if you have the technical know-how, run it on your computer, right? You could run it on your laptop. This has, in turn, created an explosion of innovation. People who were previously laboring to create apps and software using paid services like DALL-E 2 suddenly had access to a state-of-the-art model that costs only the compute time needed to operate it. Overnight, we saw people applying the model to tons of different tasks, and as you saw probably, the internet is swamped by new creations. What do these models do? In short, Stable Diffusion, and it's the entire category of these diffusing models, performs two fascinating tasks, text to image and image to image. Let's walk through each of one of these. And if you're listening to this, I would strongly suggest going to at least the YouTube version so you can see what I'm talking about. The images will also be in the newsletter. Text to image is exactly what it sounds like. Given a text prompt, the model attempts to create an image from the prompt. It draws from the huge numbers of images it learned from to try and synthesize something new. Suppose I provide a prompt that goes like this: a man sitting behind a desk, talking into a microphone, 4K resolution, photograph. What does Stable Diffusion spit out? Something like this, right? We got 4 different examples that it came up with. And they're all pretty clearly at least a man. There's one image with 2 men in it, at a desk, speaking into a microphone. Although a couple of them, the microphone is disproportionately large. Image to image does something similar, but instead of just words as a starting point, you provide an image of some kind, and the model uses that plus your text description to manufacture a new image. Suppose I provide this wonderful artistic prompt, right, which I made in PowerPoint. I think it's fair to say I'm not going to be winning any art contest, right? But that's enough for an AI to work with, along with a prompt like this: A mountainous countryside with green fields and a fast-moving river at sunrise. 4K resolution, trending on ArtStation, oil painting in the style of Rembrandt. What does that yield? A bunch of examples, but here's 4 of them that turned out really well. Right? You can still see pretty clearly the starting point reflected in this, right? Particularly in the colors and the general shape. My inept grade school art was transformed into something much more artistic by the Stable Diffusion model. That's what makes them so powerful, right? That's what makes them so amazing. It's why everyone's been talking about them all week long. What does it take to use this model? Well, there's already a ton of prepackaged web services that require no technical skill and have nominal costs or no costs. The Stable Diffusion team has a free demo up on their website. I've been using the model in Google's Colab environment, which is their machine learning environment. And I'm on the Pro plan, which is $9.99 a month. It's $10 US a month. And I get access to an absurdly powerful compute environment. And then with Stable Diffusion, instead of paying per image, I just pay per month, and I get to generate as many images as I want. I was set up at one run the other night, and I said, okay, I'm going to set this up before bed. I gave it like 400 prompts, went to bed, and came back, and the next day, of course, there's like 1,600 images that were done. What would you use this software for? Well, any kind of image generation, honestly. For example, I wrote a blog post last week about student loans, and I told Stable Diffusion to make me an image of a pig in a library rolling around in money, and it came up with this. That's pretty good, right? So at a bare minimum, for marketing purposes, you could use it to generate blog headers as one application, though that admittedly is a bit like, flying an F-35 fighter jet to the grocery store to pick up your weekly groceries. A little grossly overpowered for that use, but it does work. Think about any place where you need some kind of image, some kind of visual, blog posts, ebooks, etc. Instead of resorting to the same old clip art, right? We've all seen that PowerPoint slide with the 2 people shaking hands, right? You can now turn to a model like Stable Diffusion to create something custom, something unique, something that's yours, because we have not resolved copyright, right? It's not clear who, if anybody, owns the copyright, but if it's treated like other forms of software, like Photoshop, for example, you, the operator of the software, you provide the prompt, therefore you probably have the rights to its creations. Imagine if you're putting together a deck for public speaking, right? Instead of, again, the same old clip art graphics, or worse, using something that's copyrighted material, you use a tool like Stable Diffusion to generate unique imagery just for your presentation, right? That's a pretty easy application. So any place you can use imagery, and this applies to all images everywhere. So if you've ever stayed in a hotel, you have seen the stock painting of the watercolor of the seashell or the sailboat or the random garden that's in literally every hotel room ever. Those could be replaced with unique custom art now, right? Created by AI models. Is it high art? No, but is it better than every hotel room looking exactly the same? Well, yes. So with that in mind, what are the implications? Well, first, as we've seen with deepfakes, anytime you release a powerful model, there will absolutely be misuse of it. We've seen some already. If you download the Stable Diffusion model, it can create racist or pornographic imagery with the same ease it creates any other image. It is a tool. It is a piece of software. It has no moral compass of any kind. We, as the users of the tool, must be the ones to guide it. And of course, there's people who will misuse any tool you give them. You'll also note there are biases in the model too, right? Go back to the picture of that made of the man, right? I specified a man sitting at a desk. The model was trained on data where white men with beards was pretty clearly most commonly tagged as the definition of men. So when I said a man in the prompt, that's what the model thinks a man is, without further descriptors like an Asian man or a black man or a South African man or an Indian man. It just thinks a man is that. So there's biases in the model that you have to be aware of. Second, there are pretty clear, obvious economic implications, right? As we've seen with AI-generated writing, the bar for minimum quality has been raised. 4 years ago, Machines basically spit out word salad. Right? Today, they can write competently. What they generate is not amazing. It's slightly better than mediocre writing, I would say. But that means if you're a mediocre writer, machines can do your job better than you can. So the onus is on you to skill up. So what AI did for writing, it's now doing for art. If I owned a company that was selling, licensed stock art, I'd be real worried right now, because Stable Diffusion and models like it can generate an entire catalog of custom art. And essentially at no cost and no licensing issues. I'd be really worried. You can tell based on the starting prompt above, the PowerPoint. I mean, I'm not a particularly talented artist, right? The machines did a far better job of turning my prompt into real art than I ever could have, which means that if you're a professional artist, an artist who gets paid, and your skills are average or below average, your livelihood is now in peril from an AI that can do your job better than you can at a substantially lower cost, right? Now, if you're above average, you're still fine. If you're a great artist, you're going to be fine for a really long time. Just like if you're a great writer, machines are going to take a real long time to get to be great original writers. It's very, very difficult for them. But they can be mediocre writers today, right? So if you are a great artist, you're still good. If you are a mediocre artist, you're not. Third, as a marketer, you no longer have any excuse for bad visuals or no visuals in any of your marketing content. At a bare minimum, your visuals should always be at least machine-made mediocre, if not better. Tools like Stable Diffusion have set the bar for all of us as marketers, as communicators, in terms of the minimum level of quality expected by users. Right? You can have a custom painting today. There's no excuse not to have a custom artwork in your blog posts, for example. Fourth, Stable Diffusion itself is and will continue to be responsible for a massive flood of new art, which is great news if you love to consume art. Really bad news if your job is selling art. Like I said, if you own a stock imagery company, you got a problem. Either way, tools like Stable Diffusion are going to pave the way for an enormous glut of new imagery, right? And so, again, if your business is the selling of art, just like if your business is the selling of any creative endeavor, your brand is more essential than ever. You will live or die on your brand, on whether people will get what they want from you because it's you, not because of the art itself, but because of your brand. So if you are professionally in the space of any kind of imagery, building your brand is priority one. Finally, and what I think is most important in the long run, tools like Stable Diffusion unlock our potential as artists, all of us. I'm not an artist, like I said, but I have artistic ideas, and Stable Diffusion allows me to be an artist by proxy. I'm no longer limited by my hilariously bad skills. I can provide a crappy PowerPoint slide to the software and still get good results out of it. Still get something that I can say, yeah, that's what I had in mind. I just couldn't do it with my skills, but I gave it the parameters and it created something that is fairly close to what I would have done if I had those skills. One last philosophical note, because this was a topic of discussion this week, particularly in the Analytics for Marketers Slack. A lot of people have asked whether or not AI created art is art. And now this is purely my opinion as a layperson, but to me, that question implies a lack of understanding about what art is. Art is expression, and the value of art is always in the eye of the beholder. Right? It's always in us as the audience members looking at art. If it moves you, if it speaks to you, if it evokes something inside of you, it's art, regardless of who made it. Right? There's some art I just don't get. There's like this one piece. I think it's the Met in New York City. It's a 3x3 blue canvas. I look at that and go, I don't get it. I totally don't understand this piece of art. Other people look at it and like, wow, that is so deep. That's such a bold statement. And I'm like, eh? But it speaks to them. It does not speak to me. So it's art for them. It's not art for me, but it is art. It is art. Banish the concept, banish the phrase of saying that's not art. Art or no art, or not art. Banish that from your vocabulary. Because everything that is expression is art. There is art that's for you and art that's not for you. There's so much art, like the stuff on the hotel room wall. It's okay. It doesn't speak to me, so it's not art for me. But for somebody, be like, can I take that home to think that anyone would notice if I stole it from the hotel room, right? For some people, it may speak to them really, really strongly. So it is art. Get rid of trying to decide whether something is or is not art. Everything is art. Everything that's an expression, everything that evokes an emotion in someone is art. No matter who or what made it. All right, let's check what's in the news this week. In case you missed it, I've got that AI enables creative by proxy post. That's from last week, but I think it's important. Also this week, lots of questions on things like privacy-friendly Google Analytics alternatives, pumpkin spice, all things pumpkin spice, marketing and positioning for different industries. So lots of fun stuff to catch up on. In terms of ads, of course, the Google Analytics 4 for Marketers course I'm hawking. And this week I released a new paper, which I think everyone should have gotten an email about, called Members Only on private social media communities. It's free. There's a free download. You can get it. It's first link in the newsletter, and I'll put it in one of the ad slots as well, just so you don't miss it. Jobs this week, new positions. We have analyst of digital measurement strategy at NBC Universal. We have business operations analyst at Megit, data implementation specialist at Data to Value, digital data analytics engineer and analyst at Equifax, digital insights analyst at Eurostar, digital tracking analyst at HelloFresh. So lots of new positions coming out, which is great to see. Also in the news, alternatives to Facebook groups, 9 common mistakes marketers are making on TikTok, technical SEO checklists, more on Google's helpful content update and the fact that they're going after sites that are just peddling garbage, which is, I think, is always great to see. Keeping AI accountable to humans. Some great stuff from Simo Ahava this week on Tag Manager, using server-side Tag Manager. So lots of goodies. Upcoming events. Content Marketing World will be in a week and a half. I'll also be in the area for Inbound this week. I will not be attending the show itself, but I'll be in the area. So if I run into you, say hi. I'll just look for the guy in the crazy mask. But yeah, Content Marketing World next week. Marketing Process B2B Forum in October, and HeapCon in November. So lots of shows to keep you busy. That's the news for this week. Thank you for tuning in, for your attention as always. Stay safe. Have fun playing with the AI art tools. And if there's one that you think really speaks to you as a creation you've made, pop on by the Slack group and put it in the fun, one of the fun channels, the work-life balance channels. I'd like to see what people are doing with these tools, because the creations are as much an expression of us as they are of the tool itself. So whatever you think speaks to you, come on over and share it. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you next week.